one of the things that need to be considered is an organization really understanding what its value proposition was fully. When it has either a show or a particular signature program, and what is the value proposition aside from that? Because when you make that decision, even if the economics make a strong case for it to happen, I think it's super important that the organization go through a process where it identifies, okay, so now we don't have this signature program. Was this primarily a value proposition? If, in fact, we sell that or partner, whatever the structure looks like, what is left? And what will our members and our constituents now find the value? And that's not an exercise you do, in my opinion, the day you sign the contract.
This is Associations Thrive, the podcast celebrating successful associations and their leaders. I'm your host, Joanna Pineda, CEO and Chief Troublemaker at Matrix Group International. Listen in as top association executives tell all, revealing the creative and innovative ways they're increasing membership, generating revenue, nurturing engagement, and reimagining their organizations. By the way, if you've launched a new initiative, created new member services, or updated your governance structure and are seeing great results, I want to hear your story, and so do my listeners. I'd love to have you as a guest. Go to podcast.matrixgroup.net and apply to be on Associations Thrive. Now let's dive into this week's show. Today, I'm speaking with David Murillo, Principal and CEO of Compass Management Solutions and Executive Director of the Western Carwash Association, or WCA. David, welcome to the show.
Hey, Joanna, pleasure to be here. How are you?
David, we have so much to talk about, but let's start with Compass Management Solutions. What is that?
Yeah, Compass Management Solutions is what we would call a full-service association management company, which means we do everything from A to Z, based in California. So I'm based in Sacramento. We have one team member up in Seattle, but most of us here are in Northern California. And so I think on the association management company scale, I guess we would be on the smaller side. We've got 13 folks, almost a dozen or so groups that we work with in different capacities. As I mentioned, some we do it all for them, all the way from membership, communications, event management. And there are some groups in which we do specific things for, mostly event management. And some groups we actually handle their administrative, financial, HR, that kind of stuff for them as well.
Well, let's turn to the Western Carwash Association because you're executive director of that organization. So tell us about WCA.
Yeah, WCA is a group that recently turned 70 years old, actually.
Wow.
The name kind of gives it away of who the membership might be composed of, but it is a association of car wash operators and vendors in the industry. And the association covers 12 regional states in the Western U.S. It actually started as a group of car wash operators in LA.
Oh.
And slowly over the course of that 70-year period, it continued to evolve. At some point, it became a state association, then a few different states it began to service until eventually it is what is now, which is a regional association of those 12 Western states. For years, WCA had its own trade show. The WCA show is what it's called, along with a lot of other regional associations throughout the country that had their own trade shows as well. And then about 10 years ago, it actually integrated its trade show into what is called the Car Wash Show, which is an international show put on by the International Car Wash Association that happens. It alternates every year between Las Vegas and now Nashville for the foreseeable future.
Well, let's step back a little bit. So who are your members? They're the companies that operate car washes. Are your members like small single shop operators as well as like gigantic private equity owned car wash operations?
Great question, Joanna, because it depends on what era you're talking about. So if you would have asked me that question 10 years ago, I would have told you that most of our members, some of them were the proverbial mom and pop shops. They weren't that large in terms of employees. Let me back up just a little bit. and maybe explain that there are so many different types of car washes out there.
Ah,
There are what are called full service, which is that type where you drive up, someone takes an order of what specific services you want. You typically get out of the car,
yes.
they take the car, it goes through a tunnel, but you don't see it. It's like you're in a waiting room.
I go to one of those. Yes.
Yeah, for like 30 minutes or whatever the case is. And then it magically appears, beautifully shined and everything. And your car has probably been literally touched by maybe a dozen folks. Those are full service. And those were a lot more prevalent years ago. Obviously, with labor costs and all different types of stuff, what you've seen as a model evolve over the last few years is called the express model. And this is a model which is where the private equity folks started to come in, and much more regional companies started to become involved in the industry over the course of the last 10 years, where it's kind of like a little bit of a hybrid. You may have one attendant out there, but most of these are memberships that you have bought. You actually sit in the car while it goes through the tunnel. And usually at the end of that, there may be a vacuum cleaner that you do yourself.
Oh,
That's another type. So we've talked about two types. There is another type, which is the self-serve or in-bay automatic. The self-serve is the one most people think of when you drive into a stall, you take out the water gun, you do it yourself. My mom used to love self-serve when I was a kid, by the way. That was her favorite. It was kind of a ritual. And in that world too is the in-bay automatics, which is where you drive in and the thing moves around you, like the actual conveyor moves around you.
right, right, right.
See that C-stores or convenience stores or gas stations. So those are four of the basic types that you see in the industry now. So now let's go back to what you're saying, what most of our members are. Years ago, it was mostly the full service and self-serves. And then they were independently owned. Over the course of the last 10 years, as private equity has become much more involved in the industry, there's much bigger groups now that have regional representation and national representation with express models is mostly what we're seeing now.
Because those aren't as labor intensive, probably.
That's correct. Yeah, you can replicate those. There's a replication component to it, all different types of reasons why that model has been very lucrative. It's calming down now, but especially in the last 3 to 5 years, there was a lot of merger and acquisition activities. A lot of these full services were converted into express models, and then a lot of express models just came out of nowhere. I think a lot of folks saw in their communities an influx of a lot of express washes popping up. So that is mostly what I would say locations-wise, what our membership is now. We still have some of the traditional full-service washes, and then, of course, you have the self-serve in-bay automatics that have remained as well. So regionally, we represent between 900 to 1,000 locations within the Western U.S. I would say most of those now are expresses.
So, David, if you've got this range of members with, I guess, a cluster of them in this express wash type company, why would a car wash operator decide to join these days? Are there still issues that bring them together, which is why they choose to affiliate with WCA?
Sure, there is. And I think a lot of it is also geographically based. In California, for example, it is a very litigious and regulatory heavy environment. So advocacy is a key component of that value proposition for our members in California. And environmental regulations.
And water is a big deal in California.
And water, but water actually regionally in other states you might not always think. Washington State, Oregon, and of course, the desert Southwest, which we cover, obviously. So you're absolutely right. Water is an environmental litigation, regulation, and legislation. Those are very impacted in our region as well. So that's advocacy is certainly one of them. But then education also fits into that for compliance purposes. So WCA really focuses its education and its advocacy work on these issues currently that affect our members in this particular region. So in that sense, there is a strong value proposition for that.
Well, we got a lot to talk about when it comes to Compass and WCA, but I want to turn to your journey. How'd you get to do what you're doing? You founded Compass. You're now executive director. You can't be full-time executive director for WCA. So where did it start?
Yeah, I actually went to school originally for accounting. I went to Sacramento State. I'm a proud Hornet and on the Alumni Association of Sacramento State. And I went to school for accounting, but between you and me, that didn't turn out too good.
Okay.
So I wound up majoring in business and actually had a dual concentration in HR and insurance. And out of school, I went into the insurance route and worked in workers' compensation for a few years. I had a good friend of mine who worked for an association here in Sacramento, and I had lunch with him. And there was a gentleman who worked in the insurance industry that was looking to get into graphic design. That's what my friend did in the association space. And it was one of those fortuitous lunches where during the conversation, he said, "Hey, we're looking for a membership guy, by the way, in my association. And it needs to be someone that has a background in insurance because that's a big thing that this association does."
Oh my God, that was you.
That was me. So I was hired for that group that worked with special districts here in California. So I did that. And then within the membership area of associations, I worked for California Building Industry Association, managing an insurance program for them, an engineering group based here, and also the California Restaurant Association. And then eventually I was tapped for my first executive director role of an organization of trade contractors here and did that for a standalone group for about a year. I had a really good friend who was a partner in a public affairs firm that was looking to open up an association management component to their firm. And they said, "Would you be interested in coming opening up this part of the shop and growing it and so forth?" So I said, yes. And I brought the group that I was employed with. I made them the offer, "Hey, if you want to still work with me, would you consider going to an AMC model?" They said, yes. Actually, Western Carwash Association was one of our first clients. We grew that association management arm within the public affairs company fairly quickly within the scope of about 8 years. And then 3 years ago, 2022, some of the public affairs partners decided to go their separate ways in that firm. And none of them were really interested much in the association management side. So it gave me the opportunity to open up my shop. And there were some folks who worked with me on the association management side, and we formed Compass Management Solutions, brought most of our clients over, and that's what we've been in operation now since 2022.
So it sounds like the background in accounting and business paid off.
It did.
Combined with the membership experience. Wow.
And, it's interesting, Joanna. I actually love accounting now.
Yeah.
I love the concept of it. I was talking to the dean of business over at Sac State not too long ago, and it's the application of a lot of this stuff that once you apply it, it clicks.
Yeah, yeah.
And accounting and financial principles for sure is an example of that for me.
Well, I had Pete Sepp on the podcast. He's with the National Taxpayers Union. And he said, "Joanna, the job of a CEO is money, money, money. How do you bring it in? How do you manage it? How do you spend it?"
Yeah.
So accounting, fantastic background. Well, let me ask you a question. You're founder and CEO of Compass Management, and you obviously have people working for you, and you're managing lots of associations. How do you develop staff to become association professionals, and how do you kind of move them up?
Yeah, there are certain traits that you can see in folks of leadership, even if they're not in the association industry yet.
So you'll hire people who aren't in the association industry?
Yes, to an extent. One of our shareholders, business partner of mine, was actually someone who was a family friend, but I saw the dynamic of how this individual functioned at these friendship gatherings, and there was a leadership component to that individual. I just knew this is the kind of person who can work with the board of directors and they will respect. And part of it is that this individual was already working for a nonprofit. It wasn't an association, but it was a 501c. They were actually doing a lot of association management already. They just didn't think about it. And some of it was volunteer, some of it was professional. And they were getting back into the workforce. They were kind of going back in. So by bringing them on at least part-time in the beginning, having them work with one of our clients, get used to that, they flourished, and they're now a leader in the association space here in California. It's been an amazing journey to see.
Wow.
I think development begins with also encouraging people to volunteer for associations as well. Walk the talk, right? So for example, with our group, we really encourage our team members to become involved. Our local association here is Associations West, which used to be CalSAE, the local association executives. We encourage them to become involved in those because then you see it from the volunteer perspective. You sit on a board, you sit on a committee, you see that type of interaction. Whereas when you're only staff, you don't always have that component of it. So we encourage them to get involved in MPI. I'm involved in ASAE, Associations West. I'm also involved in the Alumni Association of my university. We encourage them to be whether it's faith-based, philanthropic, get involved in there. Our company will support that. We also invest heavily in their professional development, conferences, things of that nature, whether it's ASE, Associations West, virtual education, whatever the case is, we encourage them, go out there, find courses, because that's part of it too, being the go-getter component. Go out there and find education that you think will help bring you to the place you want to be professionally, and we'll support it for you. And obviously leading by example for us as shareholders.
Boy, that's wonderful. That's a very intentional practice of really leveling up your leadership team or your entire staff on a regular basis.
I think so, yeah.
David, let's come back to WCA. I'm interested in hearing the story of the sale of the trade show, because I know of other organizations that sold the trade show. Some in the end regretted it. Some were very happy to have sold their trade show. What's the story at WCA? And what happens when you sell your trade show? Like, what's left?
That's an excellent question. So I think in the story of WCA, as I mentioned, that a big, huge part of the identity of that association was their trade show. It was part of the value proposition of membership. And it was successful. I think it was one of the most recognized industry shows in the country. People still talk about it 10 years after it's gone. I should say after it's been integrated into a larger trade show. But as you can imagine, as is the story that I hear over and over, the costs, the production costs of larger trade shows over the last 20 years has become a really challenging thing to work through. And that was part of the story, that the economics simply weren't making sense anymore to do it. You know, sometimes shows fall victim to their own success. The larger a show gets, the fewer venues are available to actually host the show. And thus the increased costs of these destinations is a component. You add increased AV costs, food and beverage components to that. And so even though a show may be bringing more attendees, if the scale of it isn't the right scale or the growth, it can actually even make it harder to make a dime on this stuff. And I should also mention in that industry, there were also competing trade shows as well. So there was this stormish component to it that was making the economics just not work. So they actually partnered with the International Carwash Association, integrated their show. But I think one of the things that need to be considered is an organization really understanding what its value proposition was fully when it has either a show or a particular signature program, and what is the value proposition aside from that? Because when you make that decision, even if the economics make a strong case for it to happen, I think it's super important that the organization go through a process where it identifies, okay, so now we don't have this signature program. Was this primarily a value proposition?
Right.
If in fact we sell that or partner, whatever the structure looks like, what is left? And what will our members and our constituents now find the value? And that's not an exercise you do, in my opinion, the day you sign the contract. That is a runway process that you have done well.
It should help you make the decision.
That's right. And a component of that decision-making, and then part of an integration plan in a post-show world. Where do you sit?
Wow.
And I think in the case of WCA, education, still regional education was important. Obviously, the advocacy was, and we really partner strongly with ICA, the International Carwash Association. So there's a really great synergy there. But, you know, not all groups have had that discussion. And I think have found it very difficult to make that value proposition discovery after the sale of their signature program or their show. So there's certainly opportunity, but it needs to be something that is fully thought out and explored.
So, David, how's the association doing post-trade show integration into the ICA show?
It's doing well. It has found its niche. A lot of other regional shows, WCA was the first, and then a few others followed in short order to integrate their shows into the international show as well. So we have a wonderful partnership with ICA. As I mentioned, obviously, the advocacy continues to be a key component of what we do. We have a really strong educational program that we offer our different sectors of members. We actually have identified also, remember that self-serve and IBA?
Right.
That has been traditionally a sector of the industry that has been underserved. And so Western Carwash Association has really taken the laboring oar to provide education specifically for those underserved components of the industry. So a lot of our education that we provide at the big trade show is geared towards our self-serve IBA folks. We also have virtual education throughout the year. So we've really concentrated on helping to fill that gap in that particular sector of the industry that needs the education. In addition, obviously, to the general stuff that we do for our express and our full serves and the rest. So no, they're doing really well.
Now, David, WCA recently rebranded.
Right.
So why make the decision to rebrand? And what did that look like?
They had not rebranded since the sale of the trade show. Sometimes brands themselves, whether technically talking about fonts and colors and so forth, they don't age so well.
Like the visual identity looked dated?
Yeah, to an extent. It was great when it was first done. But more importantly, I think it was supposed to be emblematic of our role now in the industry in general. Regionality remains, I think, important in certain aspects, like we were talking about. Obviously, there are issues that are of importance in the Southwest and in the Western U.S. that don't necessarily apply to other parts of the country. And conversely speaking, right? I mean, we do have states within our region that have severe winter weather, but there are states out in the Northeast where that's a bigger issue.
Right. Yeah.
But there are also aspects where regionality, especially in a post-COVID world and virtual education, isn't necessarily a barrier anymore to provide value. So WCA, especially in our self-serve and in-bay automatic, that's not a regional-based type of a limited service. We can apply that type of value to members all throughout the country. So one of the things we said is WCA is still Western Carwash Association, but now it's Wash, Connect, Achieve.
Oh, interesting.
It's less of a regional-based type of a name. People recognize the three letters, but the focus is really providing those three basic pillars. Obviously, our industry is Wash, connection is huge, and then the achievement in making our operators and vendors aspire to a higher level of performance and so forth.
Man, I love that. I saw it on the website, and of course, it didn't connect.
Yeah.
WCA is the Western Carwash Association and Wash, Connect, Achieve. That is brilliant.
Yeah. Again, because we think we have programs that are of value to car wash operators and vendors all throughout the country. That was part of the branding thought. Obviously, we're still, through our bylaws and through some of our core programs, really regionally based, but some of the stuff is valuable all over the country.
David, I want to dive into something that you mentioned during the prep, and that is, you said, as an organization, we are focusing on superior experiences. Man, do I love this. What does this look like at WCA?
Yeah, and actually the superior experience engineering is a Compass management-wide concept. Yeah.
What a beautiful value. What does that look like?
So basically what it says, the concept behind it is we as a team, all of us who work for Compass, we are in the business of creating superior experiences. That's one of our key missions as an organization. What does that look like? Well, the first step basically is we use the concept of empathy. And I think that empathy sometimes is confused with sympathy or, sentimentalism. We actually say, no, what it means is you empathize by stepping into the shoes of another individual and living their perspective. So what that means is in everything we do, say, for example, we are managing a conference. Superior experience engineering starts at the strategic. So if I'm an attendee of a conference, the first and foremost thing, especially if I wrote the check or my company wrote, whatever happens, I want to make sure that my time was well spent. I didn't go through 6 hours of travel time, all this expense, spend 3 days, for to come back and say, I didn't get anything out of that. So superior experience at the strategic level means that we have, from a governance perspective, done a good job in helping our client organizations plan the theme of the conference, the speakers. We have facilitated that. We're not industry experts, but we've done a good job of making sure the right folks were in the room, that their voices were heard, so that the actual theme of the conference and the speakers and so forth were of value.
There's that value word again. You keep bringing it up.
On the more tactical and on the minuscule side, superior experience says we need to make sure there was signage that adequately points people to where they need to go. And so that actually requires us to say, okay, if I'm an attendee, especially a first time attendee, I want to make sure I know where I'm going. So that from the very minuscule detail to the strategic, that's what we're talking about. If we're talking about governance, for example, superior experience, same thing for a board member. You want to make sure that if you served on this board, you feel like you made a difference in furthering the mission of the group that you were volunteering for, that you didn't waste your time, that you were heard, that kind of thing. So as executives, that includes good agendas that make sure that you're aligning an agenda with your strategic plan. That means that you have followed all the protocols correctly to make sure that your nominating committee, all this stuff was followed through. On the detail side of it is no one wants to be in a boardroom that is hot.
Where there's no water, there's no snacks.
That's exactly right.
Screens too far. Yeah, interesting.
Or you were a vegan and then someone just gave you a pork chop. So the superior experience works at both those levels and everywhere in between. But it involves you stepping into the shoes of your constituent and saying, okay, this is what I would want if I were me. Yeah, like a golden rule type of thing.
David, I'm so borrowing this. So at the strategic level and at the detail level, it's kind of a framework for thinking about how to create an amazing experience.
It's a framework for thinking. That's exactly what it is. Yeah.
Wow. I'm going to have you back.
And I will say this, it's always a work in progress.
I'm sure.
It's an exercise that you have to consistently do, because what sometimes happens is we get so used to doing the same thing repetitive over and over and over and over that it's easy to skip that framework. You just have to constantly remind, and we do that with our team. We're superior experience engineers. That is what we are.
I love this. And creating a superior experience often requires a change to the experience so that it's not the same thing that it was last year. So you do have to constantly reevaluate the experience.
And I should say the deliverable here is super important. There's two things I want to add. One, we also create superior experiences for ourselves as team members too. And that's super important for us individually within the staff. We're always doing that for each other. The other thing I was going to say is, as far as for our clients, that translates when you create the superior experiences into increased membership rates, increased attendee rates.
Oh, yes.
So it's not just for the sake of doing it. There is a deliverable and an expectation that that will affect KPIs within the organizations by practicing this.
David, I know you're a busy man, but I got one more question for you before we close out. You are a second-year DELP scholar. Tell us about DELP and what does this mean to you?
Yeah, I think the DELP program has been one of the most interesting and rewarding experiences that I've had in a very, very long time. So DELP, I believe there's 12 professionals chosen every year to participate in the Diversity Executive Leadership Program is what it stands for. That's put on by ASAE and sponsored by Visit Detroit. And every year there's 12 professionals from all different walks of the association industry representing marginalized communities generally. And you get folks chosen in different stages in their career. Myself and a few others in the cohort of 2024 were on the CEO type of the scale, but there were also folks who are nearing or well on their way to becoming CEOs. So you get exposed to all different types of perspectives of career stage, of backgrounds, of geography, and it winds up turning into this really beautiful organization of personalities from which you have that common association type of perspective, but ultimately they develop into close friendships and also professional colleagues. And there's a certain magic to that program that I can't put my finger on, at least it was for our 12 folks. And I should explain, DELP also is a scholarship. So it's a 2-year program in which certain programs are covered through ASAE and Visit Detroit. They include the ASAE annual meeting. There is a program specifically for DELPers in Detroit every summer. It's called the DELPer Union. And there's education there on all different types of topics and really beautiful experiences there. One of the experiences I had in Detroit in 2024 was working with urban city youth. And I staffed a table that had to do with mental health and what does mental health mean to these urban city youth. And it was a fascinating experience. a perspective that I hadn't heard before. And it really changed my life in terms of, being able to talk to these kids and what mental health meant to them and the challenges that are happening. I'm not going to give any details because it was in a confidential setting, but it was certainly a life-changing experience for me. And then you get to meet all the Delpers that have come before.
Right.
Yeah, which you and I have mutual friends that are a part of that.
Oh my God, so many. Yeah. And people are very proud to be part of the program. It's like your Delp brothers and sisters is what I hear.
Yes. It's a beautiful program. I believe the selections are made in May. There's usually an informational session earlier in the year.
I think the deadline's February. Yeah.
So I would encourage any of your listeners to sit in on that session, learn about it, talk to Delpers, see if it's something you're willing to do, because it's a wonderful experience.
David, this has been a wonderful interview. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences as a founder and as a CEO. We'll have to have you back.
I would love that. Thank you so much, Joanna.
Thanks for listening to Associations Thrive. We're so glad to have you here. My personal mission and the mission of my company, Matrix Group International, is to help associations and nonprofits increase membership, generate revenue, and thrive in the digital space. I want to hear stories of how your organization is thriving in today's challenging landscape. Please apply to be on my show by going to podcast.matrixgroup.net. By the way, do you need help with a digital initiative? Maybe it's a website redesign, a new membership database, or a hybrid meeting that you're planning. I'd love to connect with you. Please visit the Matrix Group website at matrixgroup.net. Thanks again for listening to this week's episode of Associations Thrive. Don't forget to subscribe to the show, leave a 5-star rating, post a comment, and share it with your colleagues and friends.